Yo.
Hello everyone. Thanks for being here, especially after last night's party. I'm glad there are so many people. It's good for morning. When Philippe originally kind of offered me to have a slot, he said, "Oh, we've got different venues, and there's this medium one and this big one." And I said, "Oh, give me the big one, I'll be fine." And that's how you end up working until 7 in the morning to try to edit some videos and like put together some video reports. Because I also said to Philippe that I would show only recent projects and only new stuff, which was a bit of a challenge to put everything together for a nice presentation. So my name is Joanie Lemercier. I'm a French visual artist, and my main interest is to play with light and mostly with projection. And it took me a little while to realize why I love to use light in 3D space, but I guess I found out recently that there's something about how we perceive reality, and the fact that the way we see everything every day is just only light visually, either like bouncing off objects or being projected by light sources, but we perceive reality through light. And with a video projector and some kind of clever technology, you can change the light. You can send light so precisely that you can use the pixel as a unit to control the light. And I guess that's a bit of a shortcut, but then with this light you can kind of control reality or affect reality, if that makes sense. So I guess that's why I'm mostly interested in optical illusions and basically about playing with the audience perception. I'm going to show you just a couple of video clips to explain a bit more about my background. This is a really old project. Actually, it was my probably very first projection mapping project in my bedroom a few years ago. There's a video that doesn't quite play because they're hot, that was something like 6 or 7 years ago, and I'm still basically doing the same thing, projecting onto triangles and origamis. I guess I do slightly more complex things now, but the principle is still the same. And what I love about projection mapping is how you can, this kind of wow effect you get when it feels like the paper is emitting light and kind of glowing. So I'll just scroll through a few projects. So this is a more recent project that I like to do within residency. So I like to spend a week somewhere and work on the different patterns, use these very basic origamis, a couple of pictures. So I really like doing installations work at the moment. I've been playing around a lot with architectural projections, using a facade or a building as a canvas for projection. And again, one of my favorite things is to kind of change how things look, and being able with light to make this castle in France looks like if it was fragmented or being affected by some invisible forces. Or I really like playing with geometrical stuff, but also with really organic visuals. In this case, I created this kind of leaves growing onto the facade. But yeah, I'm mostly interested in the effects of projection mapping and illusions to change people's mind. I really like also experimenting with tons of different technologies. Obviously the projection, the software, all these are just tools to use to achieve something. So this was an experiment I did a few years ago, which was combining head tracking and stereoscopic projections. And basically you would be in front of this screen, you would have to wear glasses to see the stereoscopic projection. And the one thing that I don't like about stereoscopic films is that when you move around, there's no parallax. It just doesn't look realistic at all, so it kind of breaks the effect instantly, even if you just move your head, tilt your head. But with this technique, at least when you move, everything kind of follows with you and it looks kind of more realistic. So I guess I'm always trying to recreate, my holy grail would be to be able to do real holograms. And obviously it's not quite possible yet, so I'm playing around with different tricks, different technologies to, I guess, achieve that thing of like controlling light in three-dimensional space. this was a really interesting venue, really interesting space in Manchester. I was invited by Elliot Woods and we did this residency with Kyle MacDonald in this cave with really expensive equipment. There were projections on the floor all around you. You can see a bit better here. And basically there's a head tracking system. And so when you move around, then the wall vanishing point and the wall perspective just follows you. Sometimes doesn't quite work, so that's why it's a little stretched. But yeah, a lot of my work is about experimenting with technology to create really strange experiences. Right, so I guess that's it for the little introduction. It's weird, obviously you can't get the stereoscopic effect on the screen here, but it's funny how the brain is quite easy to trick, and how with a bunch of these things, and I guess you guys probably know the Oculus Rift, which also works on that principle. Yeah, so it's quite exciting to see how technology gives tools to artists to make exciting experiences. What's next? Okay, another of my experiments was to use the knowledge and the experience I had in kind of optical illusion and projection mapping to then go back to a flat projection and use the light to make the projection look a lot more three-dimensional and play with depth and again with perception. So this is a piece I did a few years ago about an Icelandic volcano that you might remember, and the idea was to kind of tell my own story of this volcano. Again, a slightly different format I've been experimenting with lately. It's also a projection on a flat print, and I use the same tricks and techniques to, again, play around with the audience perception. I'm going to say that a few times this morning, I guess. But yeah, I'm always blown away, even if I've been playing with it a lot, how just light and shadows can really have this weird effect of making things, giving more depth to objects and things. So now I'm going to try to find the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to, I guess, do the first half of this presentation about a series of installations. I did it at the end of last year. I should probably stop that. So it was a commission to do 4 installations in New York City. It was commissioned by Barney's, and I've been approached to basically produce 4 works. The whole project is called Light Fragments, and it's a triptych. I'm going to just show you a few of the mood boards. So I'm really excited and interested in the geometry in the nature, and lately I've been collecting pictures of rocks and these kind of weird structures you can find in natural stones and natural things. Another inspiration for this project, and it's going to make sense in a second. Okay, that's my rock collection on Pinterest. I know it's a bit, might look a little hippie sometimes, but I just really like the geometry and the patterns you get. I really love Metropolis from Fritzland, and since the theme for the project was fragmented light and the light in the city, we got kind of inspired by these visuals from Metropolis for the mood board. So I had to come up with a proposal to do 3 installations. I wanted so that was kind of the starting point. The first installation is this kind of weird city that kind of looks a little bit like Metropolis. It's really geometrical and really minimal, and that little city was standing on a rock, and I really wanted to make this as a real physical object, and also I wanted to then have this idea of a zoom in to this little planet, and this screen here is actually the second installation. Again, it's going to make sense in a second. And then I'm zooming even more into the structure and kind of losing sense of scale and position. I don't know if you guys remember this film from this educational film called Powers of 10. It's a really interesting short educational clip that is basically not infinite but a really long zoom out that shows the Earth and the universe on different scales. So that was kind of a starting point as well. Okay, so coming back to this little floating city with this rock and this city, I did with Davey McGuire that I invited to help me on the project. He's really good at, he's been playing around with paper structures and with projections for a while. So we made together this little mock-up that was very small, but the idea was to recreate this on a much bigger scale. So this was just a kind of proof of concept, like basic paper structure and projection mapping. So this was just to demonstrate that the kind of effect would work, and then I'll show you the next. The next step was then to build this city and this paper structure on a bigger scale. So this is about 4 meters wide by 2 meters high. And we use a pretty amazing software called Pepakura, and basically you load in a 3D model and it gives you a flat version that you can laser cut, and that so you can build yourself your own little structure. So we made this city. Here we go. I'm going to scroll through because I've got a lot to show you. So what I'm also trying to say here is that it's funny how I come from a more of a graphic design background, and then I moved to projection mapping onto architecture, and now a lot of my work is about making structures, building objects, and basically bringing stuff from the 3D software into the real world. And this was kind of okay because I did similar structures before. It was very time consuming. We had to work with a team of 3 or 4 people in a little studio we had in Bushwick in New York City. It took us ages to put these bits together, and at the beginning it looks really messy, and we were a bit worried about the final result because it was a bit of a mission. And I'm not a fabricator. I've never really learned how to build things. So this is always an interesting journey to go through all this. So with Pepakura you get these really complicated patterns with numbers, and it's basically just like a giant puzzle. And this is the mapping part. So in the second part of the presentation I'm going to talk about the software I use and the workflow, which has been changing a lot over the past few years. And this is the final piece. This is the first chapter of these 3 installations. I don't actually have much video footage, but that's kind of how it looks like just with basic light. And that's going to take me to the next project. So if you understand well this idea of zooming into the floating city, second chapter is more the base of the island. So the idea was to recreate and build physically this big kind of upside down mountain or icicle. So we started with 3D models and simulations in the 3D software. I was really inspired actually by an artwork from Kyle McDonald, who's been playing around with mirrors and projections. So I wanted to kind of work with him, so I invited him to help us making this happen, like building this huge structure. It's actually again about 4 meters wide. So he did a lot of simulations with open frameworks and a lot of tests. And we also realized by going through this process that it's super easy in the software to make things, but once you have then to bring it to the real world, then you have so many constraints, and we were not really sure how to build this. So I think the next slides are quite interesting. This is the final structure that we agreed to do. We had to be really careful about angles and little details because it was influencing the manufacturing a lot. I'm gonna hide this. These are more simulations. So at the end, we used CNC printing, CNC carving into a foam actually. And we had to slice the model into about 100 different slices. So Kyle had a lot of work to make this happen and to process the 3D model so it would be compatible with the future. This is the real thing. It's pretty big. It took a while to assemble. We then covered this with tiny mirrors, as you can see. That's a detail of it, and I'm going to show you. This is the final piece in the window, and we use 2 video projectors to then animate the structure. Let me take a second. Here we go. So I've just finished the edit last night, so it might not be, haven't seen it on a big screen yet. Cool. So that was the second chapter of this light fragments installation. And I really wanted to go from the first one, the city, from being very figurative to zoom into the matter and go towards something a lot more abstract. So the third installation is a tiny detail of this one, and I really wanted to the audience to lose the sense of scale, time, and space. One of the main inspiration I had is a piece I've seen a few years ago from Yannick Jacquet, where it's basically just a piece of mirror, a curved mirror, and with these loads of little fragments, and basically you would see what's around you in this kind of isometric render, almost kind of computer-generated render. But I really love the way this art works, just fragments the space around you, and this was one of the main inspiration for me. So the idea was also to work for this project with Boris Edelstein, which is the main guy behind the mapping festival and MadMapper. He's a software developer and a visual artist, and he's been working and experimenting a lot with LED lighting lately. And he did this really interesting stage design with 1024 architecture. Not sure if you've seen it, but it's like this big LED geometrical structure on stage. So basically the idea was to team up with Boris and create this weird structure with mirrors and LEDs where you would be completely lost and really not understand what was going on. Because these are like random simulations. And through the process we realized how difficult it is to build structures with just multiples of the same because we had to use LED strips and they're all the same size, and we can't really have much flexibility on this, so we had to do a lot of simulations, and basically it took us weeks to find out which structure would work with. So this is kind of the final visual from the front. These are like technical drawings. This is the structure itself. It took 2 to 3 months to get from the sketches and the drawings to this point. And this is basically not even the final structure. This is a big bolt that was made with cement, and we basically then covered it with PVC. Doesn't really make sense at this stage, but you will see in a second once it's covered with mirrors and LED strips. But yeah, again, it's quite weird for me to come from a graphic design background and now be kind of a builder and like assemble structures. But I think I'm gonna continue bringing 3D simulations to the real life. These are the first tests. So also Boris had to go to Shenzhen to make custom LEDs, and we had to find and work so much on tiny details such as how we would mount all these LEDs, how we would control them with the software. Laurent Novak, who's in the room, was working remotely on the software and like debugging the new framework he was working on. This is Boris, just in the street with his computer using Wi-Fi and OSC to control this weird structure. I don't really want to spoil the effect, but that's kind of how it would look like from outside. This was presented in 3 big windows in the streets, and that was on Madison Avenue in New York for about a month and a half. And we used this mirrored structure, LEDs, and we had this this one-way mirror film on the window, so the light would be caught inside and would create this kind of infinite effect, if you see what I mean. And that's the final video I just edited. Again, it might be a bit shaky sometimes. It seems to be nicer with these lights off, maybe. The piece was about 5 minutes long. Thanks. So yeah, I just finished the editing this morning, so that's why you can see some weird shaky shots, but I hope you get an idea. I kind of struggled to explain the zoom-in thing, but I hope you get the idea of the kind of 3 chapters of this thing, from like figurative to more abstract. I really love this piece. I think we're going to try to develop it more with Boris and with his team, because yeah, there's a really weird thing about perception and perspective in this case, with just mirrors and light. You can create this weird, really weird thing. The best thing for us was to be inside the window where we were setting up, because then it was just reflections everywhere until infinity. So that was really, really nice. I think we might try to do something more immersive, where people are not looking at the window but actually inside the installation. So yeah, that was the theme for the third project. I didn't mention Thomas Jacquet, who's a brilliant sound designer and music producer, and working with him always, he's really good at obviously working on the sync and like producing the sound that make the whole thing really exciting. So he's a big part. He was a big part of the project. So the live fragment project had the 4th chapter, but I won't. Maybe I'll show it another time. It was a big, stressful project that we did in collaboration with Jay-Z, and it was a long mission, but maybe another time. So yeah, that's it for the kind of recent projects. I was kind of thinking now about diving a little bit into the kind of software and technical side, if some of you are interested. Obviously, my practice has changed a bit from like making paper pyramids to the buildings, and to now these weird constructions. So I also have to change my workflow a lot, and to try to find new tools and new ways to make the work. I was trying to so I had a kind of clear idea of what the ideal workflow and ideal software would be. And I saw it's kind of clear in my mind, but I find it so difficult just to explain it and to express it in a nice way. So I'm going to show a kind of a case study of a project I did also last year. Let me go back here. So again, it was a construction, a physical object we did, and that we've installed in this place called the Atomium. It's a big spherical building in Brussels, in Belgium. And I was invited to do a piece inside, and the idea was to use projection mapping and LED lighting. You can see here both. And I wanted to create a structure that would kind of respond to the architecture. So I wanted to work with a kind of spherical object, and the idea came to work on this little planet that would be hang in the middle of the venue. And let me show you a short video. It's a combination of LEDs, projection, and construction. And I don't know why, but I'm kind of obsessed these days by tiny structures, tiny planets, and kind of this kind of slightly sci-fi ideas of having miniature worlds. So I'll just scroll through quickly so you can see some of the content. This project was really tricky because I had the same workflow for projection mapping for the past 5-6 years, and it's pretty straightforward. It doesn't leave much space for error, but it works well. But for this project, it just wasn't possible to use the kind of classic workflow. So I'll try to explain you why. So that was the process of making the little planet. You can see here the scale with our technical director Adrian standing next to this big origami. Again, we used Pepakura to build the structure. This was a render of the little planet that we built. Okay, so I'm gonna try to make this maybe short because maybe not everyone maybe is interested. It's a little bit technical. So my kind of classic workflow for projection mapping, I start by creating a template that I'm going to use for all the production. So to do the template, I often do actually 3 templates. A photo one that I can do with either a picture photography or by using the structured light, the spatial scanner with MindMapper that gives you the picture from inside the lens. Then I use this to do a vector template. I do a lot of vector animation, so I need to do an SVG. I use Illustrator. Then to do any 3D effect, any shadow, anything that kind of looks 3-dimensional, I have to build a 3D model with Cinema 4D. That's the template. I mean, it takes already a few days, and often I need to have the projector installed, everything installed, and then I do the templates. Then I can start the production. I can start making the content, usually from a storyboard and from the different ideas. To make the content, I use loads of different softwares, Cinema 4D, Illustrator, blah blah blah, the kind of classic linear editing and content creation tools. And then my output is a video file. So when my project is finished, I've got a flat 2D video file that I play back onto the object. The only problem with this, if anything moves, if the projector moves, if the perspective is different, if the lens is different, then I'm kind of fucked. So I need to do a lot of distortion and fine-tuning, and it sometimes works, but not in every case. So that's the kind of classic workflow. For the piece in the Atomium, we had a spherical object. We used 3 projectors. We were not sure where the projectors would be, what lens we would use. So the classic workflow just couldn't work at all. So I had to find a new technique, a new idea. And maybe that could take a little while, so I'm going to make it short. But basically what I work on now, what I do now, is I work on a 3D model on the computer. I create all the content and I kind of UV map it, I wrap it under my model. So then at the end I don't have just a flat video file, I have a 3D video player, I have the 3D object with the video wrapped onto it. And then there's a few more things I need to do. I need to do the projector calibration, and I think Elliot Woods and Kyle MacDonald have been doing some really interesting work when it comes to finding where your projector is, finding the extrinsics, intrinsics, the lens, the position, and everything. So I had to kind of move from the classic stuff to this new workflow, and part of the new workflow as well is to make all the content real-time and generative, as opposed to render stuff. Because as you know, like rendering takes ages, and editing as well, so the workflow and the process is quite long and it's hard to come back to the beginning. So that's why I try to use more and more real-time tools. I hope that makes sense for everyone. So I'm working on a framework that combines a lot of different functions. And maybe I could scroll through as well. Okay, so let me show you a little tool I made. Oh. Mutek. So you might recognize the floating city, the city that I showed earlier on. And so this is an export, but this was generated real time from a sound input and with an AntiVJ file. So basically, what I do now is I use sound, and I also use this small synthesizer called the calculator to basically animate my content in real time. So it's a really great way to save time and it's kind of a new way of producing content. It's really convenient for me. Just going to scroll through a couple of things. So slightly different aesthetics with also with vectors. I hope all this makes sense to you. No. I'm going to show you something slightly nicer. This is a little triangulation tool I'm working on, which basically takes, converts pictures and visuals into these nice geometrical things. Okay, so that's slightly more interesting. In this case, I'm using shaders to create this. What you see here was generated live, so there's no rendering or no video file. This is just a 3D model with ambient occlusion that kind of helps to enhance the depth and some projected shadows. So the good thing with real-time stuff that you don't need to render anything. You can just run everything off a timeline. This is another project I did recently, again, to show you the kind of aesthetic you can get and the kind of visual you could do. Usually with Cinema 4D, with the classic workflow, it takes a while to just export, render, edit, and again, all this is real time, so you can, I just rendered this last night quickly, but it's a great way to prototype visuals and to just get a new way to work on the content. I'm working on a blog post, and I'm going to document this a lot better, and this tool will actually be open source and will be kind of free to download and to use, and everyone can contribute and submit shaders or models or ideas. So I think in the next few weeks I should have something kind of ready to share, so people can contribute, and hopefully we could kind of build up little blocks. And I really need to also spend more time with Elliot. I'm not sure if he's in the room, but the tools he's been developing over the past few years, and the installation he's doing next door, line segment space, is so next level in terms of projection mapping. It's basically is registering where every pixel is in 3D space. Oops. So there's some amazing tools around, and I'd really love to see how we could kind of bring these together. It could be in VVVD like I'm doing, but I'm sure the same principle, the same ideas would apply to other frameworks, like open frameworks, Cinder, you name it. But I'm going to be interested in documenting the ideal workflow and maybe to kind of create small communities to build up and to contribute. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there because I'm already late. I'm not sure if there's time for a couple of questions. Are there any questions? Okay, no, so I think I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for attending the talk. One more thing I want to show you, if you're in Paris over the next few days, I'm working on an exhibition with Davide Coyola. That's something I haven't haven't mentioned much in my talk, but I'm working more and more in the gallery environment. And I work with a gallerist in Paris, so we're doing this show, which is opening on the 17th of April in a few days. So if you're around, please come and say hi. And I'm also working on another group exhibition in New York City at the end of this year. And I'm going to be the curator, and I'm really looking forward to kind of bring some visual artists, developers and coders into the gallery world, because I think there's a great opportunity as well to show the works in that context. So thank you very much again, and see you around.